This is a Republic Notice. The title of this Republic Notice in August 2014 is What Bush II Can Teach President Obama. What George Bush II can teach President Obama. You know, President Obama deserves to be called president, just like Bush deserves to be called president. So the title is just to make sure people can see it. But I refer to them both as presidents in speaking. Now, what President Bush II can teach President Obama is this: balance. Bush can teach him balance. President Obama is out of balance, okay? Now, let me tell you about Bush in critical thinking. And a lot of people are going to be shocked, so lend your ears when I hear this. A lot of people consider him as really one of the worst presidents we had. A lot of blacks consider him as one of the worst presidents we had. But let me tell you what he did that can teach President Obama something. Okay, now we all know that evil exists. We know about his grandfather, Prescott Bush. We know about Bush Sr., about the New World Order. We know about the Skulls and Bones Society. We know about the other stuff that is associated with the occult that he is, by popular belief, is connected with and may be connected with. I'm not sure. Or, you know, if he is connected with, I don't know how much internally his connection is, because, you know, only divinity, wisdom knows a man's heart. But anyway, we can look at evil as this. We can say, well, we can see the surface evil of this symbology, and we can claim he's just totally evil, or we can pretend that as blacks that we have no evil, even though the black man being away from the black woman is evil, because that means he's not protecting his nation. That's an act of evil, okay? So we can say by President Bush being with the Skull and Bones and the 322, he's evil, and I can say by the black man not being with his women and children and thinking that's okay, he's expressing evil that leaves his women and children unguarded and protected. For whatever reason, it's evil, because really there's no excuse. It wasn't an excuse during segregation. It wasn't an excuse from the 1930s, the 1920s, during segregation, right after slavery. So why should it be an excuse now, okay? There's no excuse. It's evil. Now, I say that to say this. When we look in terms of evil, sometimes we want to excuse ourselves and we want to look externally at external evil, but evil is kind of like non-discriminatory in many ways. But I don't want to get off the subject. I just wanted to preface that while I get into President Bush and what he can teach President Obama, and teach black men, and teach the Black Caucus. Now, well, shocking as this might be to some people, I like President Bush's political thought process. What I liked about him is, number one, he was anti-abortion. He was pro-marriages between a man and a woman. He didn't believe in abortion, and he was like, you know, what is that, long-term abortion or abortion after 6 months or partial birth abortion? That's it. He protested vehemently against partial birth abortion, and that, you know, that meant that he had some kind of reverence for life. Okay? He had some kind of reverence for life. Now, whether he funded Planned Parenthood, I really don't know. I know he funded faith-based churches, and he said the churches should have some say-so in doing things for people and being able to use them as a community resource for people to begin to rely on themselves. Now, what President Bush can teach President Obama is balance. The balance of this. You know, no one has to be all one thing or has to be all another thing. Some people can have an integrative mind. Some people can have an assessment of where they are. And to me, George Bush II had an assessment of knowing where his bread is buttered, more so than President Obama. President Bush had this assessment. Now, he put forth an executive order of legislation. This executive order of legislation was called No Child Left Behind. He was one of the few presidents that looked at the mistreatment of the educational system of black children and said, do not leave these children behind. We need to have some standards and content, and if you cannot provide this for the children, then the children must have a choice, a voucher system, a choice, and begin to provide for themselves an educational opportunity of their choice. And so charter schools came about with him. Charter schools, tutoring, and quite a few other things. The voucher program came along with President Bush. He's the executor and the architect of this. Now, it benefited black children, and I know this because I have a disabled son. And at that particular time, before it was vehemently opposed by the fascist teachers union, and some of these schools who had a normalcy, a white supremacy normalcy of failing black children and just throwing them in a trash can and feeling at ease in doing it, George Bush sends their conscience. They didn't like George Bush sending their conscience about these constitutional children, citizens, and their right to choice, and their right to be educated, and their rights to have standards, and their rights to have qualified teachers, and their rights to have a choice, and their rights to have the same opportunity as Catholic school students who use public funding in quasi-private schools, such as Catholic schools and other private schools. They all come back to ask the Constitution for welfare. I don't care whether they call them scholarships or partial scholarships. They're all on the dole. They're all on the dole. And President Bush said, you have to deal with these constitutional citizens and their right to a free and appropriate education based on their need, and you can't use the excuse of this and that and the other, their economic background, or their one parent, or that, this and that and the other. You know, you can have what you call tutoring for them, you can send them to another school, and if you fail as a school, you have to provide them with tutoring or voucher or the right to change and to meet their educational needs so that they can become productive citizens. Now, this was legislation mainly benefited black children because they were the ones that the system was throwing away. So therefore it was leveraged towards them, since they were the main throwaway children that they felt as though they can throw away and get away with and not care about the standards or the learning content or moving these children through society and sending them straight to prison. Now, what's interesting about this is George Bush presidency was railroaded and character assassinated. His presidency was character assassinated by some other powers who may not have liked what he did. Okay? See, he served the Constitution, which a lot of blacks don't realize. And before he was elected, he went to a lot of black churches and spoke about how he was against abortion and that marriage can only be between a man and a woman. And he caught the black church's attention. And in turn, he was elected. And some people say he stole the election. But he did not really steal the election. As we see, Florida is corrupt. Florida is corrupt. And because Florida is corrupt, you cannot say he stole the election. You know, because there's a lot of shenanigans that go on, and because black people voted for him in these churches, a lot of the majority, as you would not believe, voted for him. Yes, there's some blacks that wanted Gore, but he made his rounds in black churches, and the ministers had the influence over a lot of black people. So you just can't take one state where something went wrong and cut out all the other states of nationality that did vote for him because of his anti-abortion stance and marriage being between a man and a woman. Now, why am I telling you this? Because what what George Bush can teach President Obama is balance. Okay? I have my worldly concerns, and I have what I do and what I do, but he didn't throw the constitutional babies away, you see. See, George Bush, he served the least of these. And when the kingdom looks at presidents, they're going to look at what president served the least of these. This is what Jesus Christ looks at. Who served and who defended and who proposed the care for the least of these. Now, I'm going to tell you, the whole teachers union fought him. These schools, they went into a frenzy. I mean, they went into a parasitic frenzy. The teachers union, the schools within the state, I mean, they was mad as hell at George Bush for trying to leverage these children. Since blacks was the main one trashed, the legislation benefited them. So the schools, demons, and national demons at the state education agencies and the education agencies of the counties, they had a demon frenzy going on about what George Bush did, but George Bush didn't care about the frenzy that he knew it would come. He knew he had an obligation to the Constitution because that's where his bread is buttered. He knows the Constitution is the law of the land, and those children are constitutional citizen heirs. Now, President Obama feels as though he can do away with that legislation. What he did was exempt some schools from that, or the schools, but he can't exempt them because once George Bush legislated this, and blacks took advantage of it, because I was one with my son. I took advantage of it. That means it became part of non-consent jurisdiction. So President Obama can't come in and override all of them blacks and by law and do away with this executive order. So he may give them an exemption, but what President Obama is doing now is giving them a non-consent exemption for them to fail black students. So it means that the school, the state educational agencies are in full violation of the Constitution, and they're acting in lawlessness because no one consented for them to do away with No Child Left Behind within any state, or to deprive black children of a choice to education as a supreme child in the Constitution, which is the God sovereignty of this nation. Now, after President Bush did that, John Lewis had been trying to get Clinton, during the whole Clinton administration, and everybody, to sign legislation for the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. Well, George Bush is the only one that he penetrated to sign this legislation for the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. Executive order, wait a minute, H.R. 3491, okay? H.R. 3491. So soon as he got in there, he kept his promise to black churches. He put in the educational law, and by executive order of No Child Left Behind. 2 years later, the African American Museum that's going to be on the Mall in Washington. And these are going to be long-standing things that said he served the least of these. You can say he's with Skull and Bones, this and that and the other, and he's, well, you know, he's part of Prescott Bush, and he's part of the George Bush Senior New World Order. But one thing he did, he recognized the Constitution. See, he recognized the Constitution is the bread and butter of this land and everything, and that them children in the Constitution are the least of these which Jesus Christ told him to take care of. Now, his wife, Laura Bush, I can't leave her out because I think she's a beautiful person. I remember her on the television one day. A little black boy called and said, well, what should we do about the discrimination in education? And you know, Mrs. Bush told him, you open a book and you read. In other words, don't worry, don't let nobody stop you. You open a book and you read. So I'm saying, you know, them as a couple, I cannot really just isolate him without looking at the woman that influences him, so I give her credit too. Now, this is not having Stockholm Syndrome, because I understand what Stockholm Syndrome is. This is trying to show you the difference of balance and imbalances. Now, what President Obama did as soon as he came in, a Chinese lady was serving the Constitution over there in Washington, D.C., taking advantage of what President Bush did, and she gave the children vouchers because she said that they were still in their life chances if they didn't have vouchers in this. Well, President Obama came in and snatched the voucher right out of the child's hand and said, stay in public school. He snatched away the opportunity of choice. In other words, he stabbed the black child in the back and cut short his life chances, and then went to do legislation and tell the states that they didn't have to do nothing, and the school districts that they didn't have to do nothing for these children. Now, this legislation of No Child Left Behind is already established, and President Obama, he can do all the funky things he wants, but he's under non-consent jurisdiction, so anything he signs is non-consent jurisdiction. Therefore, all school state educational agencies are in violation of the Constitution, because non-consent is still with his signature. He cannot go outside the Constitution because he serves the Constitution whether he like it or not. And his wife is a non-consenter, so is his mother-in-law and that. So he's under non-consent jurisdiction because he has children with a non-consenter. So his signature is non-consent. So what he did was non-consent state educational agencies and a teachers union from throwing away No Child Left Behind, which was Bush executive order. So they're all in violation. And as a punishment, everyone in that teachers union, pensions. It's not going to be guaranteed. Everyone in the state educational agency, pensions, is not going to be guaranteed. Because you consent that you can steal the lives of these children, then your children's lives will be stolen. And you will see you are a dumb contractor in the end, because you don't know where your bread and butter is. Meanwhile, President Bush, no matter how evil we thought he was, we know a mass of evil across this nation fought him tooth and nail, and the demons came out of their eyes, ears, brains, and everything when he sought to protect the educational rights of black children. Okay? So what President Obama and the Black Caucus can learn from them, stop being so organically tongue-licking evil white and have some damn balance and understand you serve the Constitution even with your black ass, and your black ass is not exempt from being looked at by the kingdom of how you treat the least of these. That's what y'all can all learn from President Bush. And they tried to degrade and character assassinate his presidency because of this. You know, and they blamed all this Florida stuff. All this Florida stuff was created to try to begin the character assassination because they know he read the Bible. And they wasn't sure how far they could trust him. And then in the end, they totally trashed and character assassinated his presidency because of these legislative acts he did that were of constitutionality. This is Mary Omni from the House of King David. Shalom.